So welcome everybody. It's 12:05. We're going to get started. I just want to say thank you so much for coming out to these weekly launch lecture series. It's really great to see all of you here. If you have a chance, would love to even just hear kind of where you're calling in from. If you can jump in the chat and just say anything about introduce yourself. I think it's really lovely to see the crowd here. Just for a bit of context, Future Sketches is a group at the MIT Media Lab, and we're looking at kind of what are the tools that artists and designers will be using in the future. And we're building artifacts and building tools and trying to ask these questions. And one thing that's been really helpful for us is to have outside experts come in and talk about their work and their process and the things that they're engaging with. And Vera, who I'm going to pass it over in a second, is a master's student in the group, has been organizing this lunch lecture series. So I'm going to pass it over to Vera just to give some context and introduce our speaker today.
Thanks, Zach. I'm just going to explain a little bit about the lunch lecture series that you're now joining today. I'm really happy to have everyone here. We started this back in 2019 before I was part of the Media Lab, but basically kind of these lunch lecture series that are discussing topics that we as a group are interested in. And the group, you know, it's a really great group, and we do feel like some of the things we talk about are relevant to like a larger community than just our group. So that's how we started these lunch lectures. And yeah, we started thinking about the current one, which is about generative AI and artistic practice over the course of last year, when, as you probably know, generative AI really kind of exploded, and we felt really kind of overwhelmed by it. And also we're talking about it a lot as a group, and yeah, we thought it would be just really interesting to see like how artists are working with this, and basically how we can work with this as artists, and how we can give this a space in the creative work field, basically. So yeah, how can we engage with it, but also what are maybe ethical implications or holistic means of co-creation. So that's the series that you're joining today. Good to know is that we are recording. We will also post the recording. So just let you know if you're not comfortable with that, like just don't put on your camera. But yeah, please be aware of that. And yeah, that's kind of the outline of the whole series. And today we're really, really happy to have Sebastian Schmieg with us, who is an artist who in his work kind of investigates the circulation of different types of media, like images and text, but also bodies. And he creates really playful and I would say like also humorous interventions and works that question the shiny side of technology and networks in our society, and also explores kind of realities or painful truths that lie behind them, but sometimes also funny truths. And what I like about this work is that it's quite interdisciplinary, and that he chooses really interesting mediums. So like more traditional ones like videos or websites, but also karaoke performances or delivery services to kind of address new technologies like AI or NFTs. So yeah, today we asked him to talk about his practice and also how he works with AI or how that comes back in his work. So please give him a warm welcome. You can clap or put an emoji, and then we can hear more about his work. Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you a lot for the invitation. Thanks for having me, and thank you everybody for coming and joining and taking your time to be here. Really an honor. So yeah, let me start by sharing my screen and move this out of the way. Yeah. Where's the cursor here? Okay, so before I start, to give you a brief idea of what I'm going to do is, so sometimes I do, let's say, more talks more like focus on a narrative or a topic and explore that. Today I'm more looking at several pieces, and the way I'm going to do this is in the beginning, very briefly, way too brief, I will show 1, 2, 3 pieces. It might be too brief in the sense that you won't really understand it, but I think it's maybe a good pointer for you to later go then to the website and have a closer look. And then later, I will introduce a piece called Prompt Battle, which I think relates the closest to the topic of generative AI. So there I will have like a proper presentation and yeah, give you an introduction to that piece. So I was thinking, how does my practice relate to generative AI? And I thought that actually, to be honest, I don't use AI software or systems, or have not used it that much in my practice so far, here and there sometimes. But actually, the first time I engaged with AI in my artistic practice was proper generative AI, and I thought I would briefly look at that piece. I think it was 2014 or 14 when I found out about these neural networks which you could use. Like, you collected text, you fed it into the network, and was a long short-term memory neural network architecture. It would, based on the texts you had given it, it would predict the next letter and generate sentences and texts and words and so on. And what I did back then, I was quite fascinated by Ray Kurzweil, his predictions for the coming singularity, and also what I found out about him in the movie Transcendent Man is that he was working towards this AI and this technological singularity, in part because his father died when Ray Kurzweil was quite young and he still misses him. And so he has this room full of notes taken by his father. And actually, back then, his idea was at some point to feed all these notes, all the text that was written by his father, into some AI. And so he could talk again to his father, which I thought was both very moving, but also tragic in a way. And what I made a very simple piece. Here you see a screen recording of an early version. I made a piece in which I fed all the books written by Ray Kurzweil into a long short-term memory, packaged it as a screensaver that people could buy. And so you would install it on your computer, and every time the screensaver came on, it would learn bit by bit to write like Ray Kurzweil. So you would read a Ray Kurzweil on your computer while you weren't using the computer. But back then, like if you compare it now to GPT and all these things, it wasn't perfect at all. And that's what I found quite interesting. It was more Dadaistic. Like, it would make up words that didn't exist. It was, sort of a weird language, and just like a very rough approximation of Ray Kurzweil. And I then installed it in different ways. One which I quite liked was here in South Korea. There was this huge LED band, or whatever you call it, like this moving text. And he was also living there, sort of learning how to write and live on as a building, sort of. Yeah. And we'll then jump here to briefly explain a bit how I moved on from there. So I was really quite fascinated by this whole like neural network stuff, AI stuff, but I really didn't understand how this was possible. And I tried to read some papers, and what I found interesting at that point was the relationship to data sets and how data sets were created, so that suddenly the computer, like a text-based or a number-based thing, could suddenly see things in the world and give them a name and recognize them, or even see like emotions and so on. And I found out about this, which by now everybody knows, that like all these data sets were created on Amazon Mechanical Turk and so on. And so I worked quite a lot around the topic of what I call humans as software extensions, which I also wrote a text about in 2017, 2018. To briefly summarize, I will read this sentence. Like, it's on digital platforms, these humans as software extensions, they can be hired with a click to serve as thinking units and bodies in the real world that extend the algorithmic systems, and they can be fired just as easily. And don't be mistaken, there is no we and them, we are all human software extensions. And I was working a lot around this idea, and I was looking at these outsourcing platforms like Mechanical Turk, but also Upwork and Fiverr. I was looking at how through these interfaces and platforms you could really just use people, like you would install like a plugin in your browser, enhance something, and once you don't need it anymore, or a plugin in another software, you just deinstall it like really in a clean way. And I was working around this also because to me there was a big part of AI was this access to really cheap human labor, or relatively cheap human labor. And I will in a moment show also a simple piece around that idea. And what I then later developed was, for me, the concept of laborious intelligence, where the idea is that what has or was created until then wasn't really artificial intelligence, but something I call laborious intelligence, because really it was based on a lot of labor. Things didn't really work often, you know, like you maybe remember Facebook M or some Google Assistant, where it turned out there were actually people sitting somewhere pretending to be a bot, or being on the phone pretending to be like some AI that can talk. And so I coined this like laborious intelligence. And one thing that I did around this was I worked with a Cocoa dataset, which back then was, I think, sponsored by Microsoft. And what made it special was that in this dataset, early datasets, like image datasets, had a caption that people wrote, and then they would have rectangles around objects. But this dataset was special because people really had to click around the shape of objects or people, and then you could teach the software the shape of these things. So here are people, there's a frisbee, and there is a cup of something to drink. And I made a really simple piece just to sort of celebrate these people making these outlines. And I'm just in this piece called Segmentation Network from 2016, the website, but also I projected there, like this is playing back the outlines people are or were putting into the data set. So what we are seeing here is a fast forward of the labor that went into creating the data set, just to, as I said, celebrated the effort, but also to look at what is actually in the data set, everything that is inside one of these lines, and everything that does not exist, the computer can't see, is outside of this. And it's a collage of image, a top of image, and each like line with the same color and thickness is coming from the same image. So that was one way of working around this. But as Vera also said in the introduction, to me, even if I'm critically working towards something, for me it's super important that I have approached the topic with joy, and usually it's born out of fascination, that even if I think something, there are some issues, I really usually work with things that I find fascinating and that I enjoy. And thus I create like or try to create pieces that have some humor and deal with it in a sort of funny way. And like for lack of time, just like to point out, one of these pieces is this piece called I Will Say Whatever You Want in Front of a Pizza, which is a Prezi presentation, you know, these where it's everything is moving, you zoom in and zoom out. And it's a speculative story about people on Mechanical Turk and Fiverr and so on, that at some point come together and secretly manipulate data sets to change things happening in the future. Because data sets sort of are the basis of the future, if you will. And it's online, so you can check it out. And another one that's quite recent is this piece called How to Give Your Best Self Some Rest, in which also not like generative AI, but the way I approached AI at that time is that, yeah, when you look at least at that point at a lot of AI software and machinery and so on, often it was, as I said in the beginning, it promised more than it could deliver. But I thought there was something in this which I really liked, and there was that, like, these machines or algorithms, they're sort of like they under-deliver, they underperform, under-deliver, and in a way that you still like them. Okay, so like the smart assistant doesn't really understand me, but I still like it. And I forgive it for not understanding me. Or here, this little pizza delivery thing, it's like remotely controlled by people in Colombia. It's not intelligent, it looks only that way, but it's cute and I like it, or people like it. And so I thought about, like, how could you pretend to be like one of these things and then, yeah, sort of allow yourself to make a lot of mistakes, because wait, look, you are an AI makes mistake, people still like you, just take it easy. And it's also a video that you can check out online, first piece of mine in which I act or try to act in front of the camera. So and I made a very simple and shaky face filter purposely. Yeah. So yeah, that is also online. You can check it out. And from there, I will switch to like jump into a piece that is called Prompt Battle. Prompt Battle is a piece I did together with a bunch of people who I will in a moment introduce. But to give you some context, next to making art, I also teach interface design at a design faculty in Dresden, at the HTW Dresden. And I brought this idea of the prompt battle to the faculty, and together with a colleague, Sebastian Schmieg, and 6 students, we developed the prompt battle because, like DALL-E, stable diffusion, and so on, of course, is like a really big thing in a design school. Like, what do you do with it? What does it mean? Should we use it? For what do we use it? How do you prepare students for the future? And so on. And all these questions we sort of wanted to address with a prompt battle. And I will start by, I will briefly, like, later show how it works, but I will start by showing a video, I think, which gives you a good idea. So this is a TikTok by Aaron Bartol. He was there at the third prompt battle.
Following image. Reminiscent on this
So what is the prompt battle? Oh, sorry, how do I go to the next one? Yeah. So the prompt battle, at least on the surface and structurally, it's a sort of a game show inspired by rap battles. People sit down or they stand, whatever, but they face each other using text-to-image software. And their task is, like, we give them tasks in that battle, and they have to write prompts one against each other, and then when they hit generate, things are generated, and then one of the two wins. So one of the tasks, for example, they are given is recreate the following image, and one of these images could be like this. It's a collage by Hannah Höch, like back in the days, Dada, which we thought was quite fitting to how DALL-E and others work. So people have to then recreate this image using DALL-E is what we used. Or another one that we gave them is this image, where it's, I think, quite interesting, where you have to, as a contestant, where you have to think, okay, how would I draw this? Doesn't really matter, but how does the text-to-image software actually think of a square-shaped wheel? And I think the solution is sort of have a bathroom mirror or a frame from museum and so on. And then inside there's a painting of spokes and so on. So it's really like you have to think backwards, sort of. And then after 1 minute, the prompt is like fixed, it's frozen, the software generates an image, and then the audience chooses who of the two players has like written the better prompt, who has received then the better image from the software, and then and so on. So like you get a winner. And the whole thing is like a proper tournament. We start usually with 8 players, and they face off like in a first round. Then you have semifinals and a final, and in the end you have a winner who then wins really the proper prompt battle official scarf, which I think is quite a beautiful object. And yeah, then you can wear this and say, look, I won the prompt battle. And I think what makes it also quite an entertaining thing is, among several things, is that no matter what prompt you type in, something unexpected is going to happen, unless you are like a super good prompt engineer who can sort of foresee what is going to happen. But I think usually it's a big surprise what sort of like what image will be generated. That makes it quite funny, this gap between like a prompt, which often is also like a funny prompt because people try to win over the audience, and then an image that is also often unexpected, and if it's funny, then you win. Usually that's how it works. And we also did it like in a different setup like this, so it's not like a fixed setup. We try to accommodate like whatever the situation is in which it's happening. So in that case, people had to move instead of like vote by clapping, which we did at Transmediale, which is the one I showed before. Here, people had to actually stand behind the player whose image they liked more, and then we would count on which side are more people. And another one we did was an online version, which was more in the context of photography. And so we picked tasks that were more revolving around photography. So for example, here, place yourself into a famous Hollywood movie of your choice. And what was interesting here is in this one, particularly, you had here, for example, right now playing Penelope Umbrico, like a proper photographer, an artist working with images and image archives, and then like going off against or facing proper prompt engineers. And what's interesting, like there are different strategies how they would like deal with this. And of course, like the 3 times we already did this, every single time one of the contestants ran into OpenAI's limits that they have imposed on the software, like using, I don't know, using a blocked word or something. So here, that was actually a good moment because the task was a prompt designer walks into a bar and they had to finish this joke. And this was quite well done here because like it led to this like error message. And I think Tristan, who did this, and then won this round. And here's one of that is the winning image from the online battle. And if you look at the image, it itself is not very interesting. It's even not a really like a good image. You can see like it's super badly rendered by DALL-E sort of. So what matters here for a prompt battle is more the context. So for that task, we had sampled words from the audience, 3 words, and people had to integrate these words into their prompts. And this was like, in that context, was a really good photo. But it's really, I think, like AI generated image often only makes sense when you relate it to how it's being created. Otherwise, it's often just like some random image. But if you have like a context for it, it sort of makes sense and makes it interesting. And yeah, people were, this is Katrina Sluice, she's working for Photographers Gallery in London, and she was sort of, yeah, happy that in the end, like a photographer won the battle and not one of the prompt engineers. Like she was rooting for the photographers. Niels, who won the battle, was like a proper like photographer sitting in his studio and playing DALL-E on the side. Okay, and I will now give a few words like, now this is how prompt battle works, but why do we do it that way, and what actually happens during the prompt battle? It's not just like people battling it out to get the prompt battle winner, but it's a format which we try to use like as a discursive thing. So people try to think, discuss, and so on. So students created videos that every now and then we play between rounds of people battling each other. Here's one example.
Welcome to Prompt Battle. Risks and limitations. The launch of text-to-image generators caused numerous ethical, economic, copyright, and aesthetic questions. The release of DALL-E 2 was accompanied by a long text listing potential risks and side effects. As always, when it comes to the use of AI, discriminatory outcomes can emerge that reinforce sexism, racism, and classism. Risk is the misuse of image synthesis tools to create offensive and violent content. In order to avoid this, content moderation at DALL-E 2 is fairly strict. In fact, there is no hate, harassment, violence, sex, or nudity allowed. In spite of the content moderation policy, there are ways to get around it. For instance, instead of typing in blood, you can write red liquid, red sea, or ketchup. Sometimes it's little tricks that make the AI create images that are not actually intended by its creators. What do you think? Should access to these powerful tools be restricted? Should they be dispensed with completely to avoid serious harm? Who decides what is violent, what is sexist, and what is appropriate? And now, let's get back to the battle.
Fabian, make me proud.
Welcome to
Okay, because so we have these videos in between. It's like a game show, but then you have this layer with information and questions and interesting stuff. But we also try to react to stuff that is happening in the field of generative AI or text to image. So for example, I guess most of you are aware like of lawsuits now, for example, one by Getty Images, which is quite a big thing, which will be interesting how this is going to play out, like that in this case, Stable Diffusion or the Lion data set is using Getty images without asking for like it wasn't allowed to use them, which then always like the argument is, well, it doesn't matter because all that is in the models is an abstraction. But then on the other side, you have this paper where they claim that they could actually recreate images from the data set out of the model. So in the model, there are apparently here and there at least a few images that were in the data set, which it's a very tiny fraction in that case, but it's still something that would play into or that will play into such a lawsuit. And this we are trying to then, for example, address by saying, okay, one of the tasks is commit as many copyright infringements as possible in one image. So people are really like pushed to do this. And I think last time they used a lot of like Disney, Mickey Mouse, whatever references. Then there's another thing which we try to address, that is this like narrative often embedded in this AI discourse, at least like recently, is this of it will replace people. So AI is here and it's going to replace people. Who knows? And is that really like what we are after here? But we then also have this prompt of, or this task of, imagine you're a stock photographer. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So again, playfully addressing this topic. Or yeah, we'll play a video. You can see for yourself another task. Or maybe I'm going to read it. How does it feel like when text-to-image CEOs tell you they're unlocking humanity's creativity, which is across the board of all these tools, the big promise that Imad Mustak and so on, David Halls, it's all what they promise.
10 seconds left. Time is up. Generate your content.
Here again, you see how you then win over the audience, because funny enough, even if you only write bad, it will generate a complex image. Doesn't really matter how simple the prompt is. So that's another way of like addressing this topic. And one of the last ones, which we're also trying to address, is this one. Probably also many of you have seen this, is that turns out a lot of images in Stable Diffusion are from ArtStation, and it's become like a very good strategy if you want to create good images to include in your prompt trending on ArtStation, because that way you will create a certain aesthetic and you can be sure it's gonna be a sort of like, if you like that aesthetic, it's gonna be one of the better images that you're going to create. And so people on the platform got really upset about this, and they started uploading these images that said no to AI generated images, because they didn't want to be, first of all, part of the data set. Second, they didn't want AI generated images then on ArtStation, because it's this kind of battle. Like, people sit at home, they draw these, I don't know, unicorns with a lot of like effort, and then somebody comes around, types in unicorn trending on ArtStation, and have the same unicorn, and they are sort of like upset. Wait, I invested so much time in this, what are you doing here? And this also then led to battle situation between like no AI artists and so-called AI artists, who then pretended, oh shit, look, the attack already reached mid-journey training data. So when they pretended, when you now created something with mid-journey, you would have these no AI signs as part of the generated images. So sort of acknowledging this was quite a good strategy, a nice hack, but at the same time trying to make fun of them and saying, look, it's not that easy. And what we did is we said, okay, recreate the following image. We use this image, and then I hope you can see it, like, how do people then address this? We have one player here that's also like the one who won the whole battle. He was trying to recreate the image, but then we have another player who was really against that image, and he was trying to create this wonderful landscape with a neon dragon flying in night Tokyo and so on, like making a statement again. So yeah, I guess it's become obvious, but I will take this as an opportunity to point it out. So prompt battle was sort of born out of the observation that the whole topic structurally feels like a battle. At least it felt to me like when I logged onto Twitter, people were battling who had generated the better image. OpenAI is battling Stability AI. Europe is battling the US in the AI race, and so on and so on. Like no AI artists against AI artists. And structurally, it seems to be quite a battle. Which brings me to the end. I will briefly circle back to the thing I showed in the beginning, the laborious intelligence and humans as software extensions, because what I found interesting is that the promise now is, well, look, at the old AI was all based on human labor, but now we have this unsupervised learning. We don't need people clicking all the time, generating data sets and so on. But turns out that, I mean, it's clear for ChatGPT and the likes, but it's also probably happening for DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, that these are again based on a lot of human labor, obviously all the scraped images and the captions, but also again on platforms like Scale, where people have to say, okay, this prompt and that image, they fit together, others don't, and so on and so on. So I'm quite curious if how that's going to play out in the end, if it's still so much human labor that goes into it, or if there's another way of doing it. And to have more of like example why that might be a problem. I guess also many of you have read that article where it became clear that OpenAI was using SamaSource as an outsourcing platform, who are like using workers in Kenya and other parts of Africa, and they used them or employed them to generate data sets for ChatGPT, I think, but also for assumedly for DALL-E. And they said here, Sama delivered OpenAI a sample batch of 1,500 images, and some of those images were categorized C4, which is their internal label for child sexual abuse. C3 is bestiality, rape, and sexual slavery. Then there is like detail of death, violence, and so on, which of course makes sense. They need these images to create filters then later as like a top of their generator. But again, we see here we need this kind of label to go into this to build these. And then the question becomes like, what does this mean for the tools if that kind of stuff is like behind it and at the core of this? So yeah, I will probably finish with this image of the OpenAI co-founder and chief scientist, Ilya Sutskever. And you might not be able to read it. I will read it for you. The revolution will not be supervised, which maybe needs a question mark. Let's see. That sounds interesting. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. URL, Instagram, Twitter.
Thank you. Everyone, please give a big applause for Sebastian. You can also do it with these emojis. Oh, that was so nice. I saw, thank you so much, Sebastian. I saw in the chat as well that, and now I'm again not like it's a hard thing to pronounce, but TRPTI Sangri said that I'm truly enjoying how your art uses humor to comment on society. Super intelligent and impactful. I've been smiling throughout the presentation. But I also noticed this that the whole time I was like, ha, like smiling because it's really nice to see the kind of the humor you're using to address like quite big or serious topics. It's really nice.
Thank you.
So there were, yeah, really, really good to see, and there were a few questions in the chat. So I listed them. If you have more, like please post them in the chat as well for Sebastian. So Zach asked, I'm curious to know what the best approach to prompt battle is. Did anything surprise you from winning prompt?
Yeah, good question. Thanks. So 2 things. It turns out you need some special talent to be good at it. And the first battle we did, there was one person, she didn't know about it. She just randomly walked in and she won the thing. And it was kind of like, it wasn't by chance, she was really good at it. And she had, I think, two abilities. She had like easily, she could imagine how this system works because, you know, I think I've read it on Twitter, so-called boomer prompts, where you type like a long description of what you want to see. It's not the way to go. You have to imagine like, how is this thing gonna work? But the main thing is also, I mean, that is important for the recreate an image task, but we have a lot of tasks that are not based on recreating an image, but you have to like sort of answer a question. And the key there is humor. That really like wins over the audience is humor and play with this gap between your prompt and what's gonna be like created through that prompt.
Nice. That's really kind of funny. I like the term boomer prompt. It's really good. There was another question by Scott G.K. McLeod. How does prompt battle differ, or how might it, from the emerging Twitter posting conversation? If it emerges with AI, but is perhaps more distributed like the internet than the prompt battle format. Wait. So I think that the question is like, how does it differ from when people are posting on Twitter?
Yeah. How does it differ? No,
the battle concept. So I guess
from people battling on Twitter, or from just like in general people posting stuff on Twitter. I mean, I would say the prompt battle concept was in the air, and probably we weren't the only ones picking this concept out of the air. So I think there's probably similar things happening there. But I think what is important for us is this having this layer of like discourse embedded in it. And also, even though we did one online, for us, it's also sort of important to come together like in a place. We also have an AI bar by 2 students with like AI generated drinks, and then you hang out and you get talking, and that is quite like important to us.
That sounds nice. That sounds like a bar I would want to go to.
Yeah.
Nice. There was another question by Scott, which is Sebastian, have you come up against network neutrality questions in Europe in particular in your work, so in your great AI designs? And then the second part of the question is regarding Stanford professor of law and computer science, Barbara from Shaywick. So I guess the question is really more about like the network neutrality between like the rules that are in Europe and in the US kind of differ, right? So if you've seen like anything happen with that.
No, I can't really speak to that. I know too little about that. I mean, I wonder, but I can't say anything about it. I wonder what it means that Stability AI is at least legally based in London, and if Brexit played in their favor for being like in the right place. But I have really no idea, honestly.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. I was also wondering, because you mentioned that the prompt capital was done with DALL-E, was always done with DALL-E. Have you ever tried it with different platforms?
No, so far not. No. And we might switch, but we use DALL-E like in the beginning. In the beginning, what I did, I wrote a browser extension, which I installed on the players' computers, and then it turned the DALL-E website into a different website, but it was still the DALL-E website. But what we are using now is the DALL-E API, just because it's simple. In the beginning, it was simple, but we might switch to Stable Diffusion.
No, I mean, it's already so nice, but it's like I'm curious also if you would give it if you would give it the same prompt, it would probably be harder to recreate an image with a different platform. So it could be like a extra challenge in the game.
Yeah, that's what we thought about in the beginning. So like choose your weapon, that you could pick one of the like Midjourney stability, like stable, but it made things too complicated, but maybe we will do it that way in the future, who knows.
I really like that. It really sounds like in the computer games that you can select like a weapon. I'm like visualizing. That's really fun. Zach also asks, I wonder if you can talk at all about search by image, which is a video I show to students often in like capitalized and exclamation mark, and I really love.
Yeah. I have to then share my screen maybe for it to make sense to talk about it. 1 second. Yeah, well, I will start playing it. I hope it works. So that is really, I was still a student when I started making search by image, and search by image is a piece or it's a series of videos and also a book and a series of blankets. But basically what it does is I'm feeding one image into Google search by image. I look what is the result as the most similar image, then use that image again to feed it into search by image, look again, what is the most similar image. And so you get this recursive chain of images that will, most of the time really like go through all the way through the Google archive. And so in the beginning for this video, which I think was the most interesting one, I started with a transparent PNG, and then it goes like through a lot of Hubble telescope. I can skip forward, it's like some movie stills, and then you get like these product shots where like a racing car then turns into some point, I think, a rifle and so on. Yeah, and I think we kind of stop. Why I what was interesting for me then and why I started with this is that search for image was like super new, and I was really, again, fascinated. And I was uploading all the images I could find. And when I uploaded images of dogs, and especially of a dachshund, you would receive as most similar images naked people, which made me realize, okay, look, this thing is more open than Google intended it to be. So it gives more access to their archive than they wanted. And this is not happening anymore. And this, yeah, I guess maybe is similar to the moment that we have right now, where like ChatGPT and similar stuff is just more open and more breakable than they intended it to be, which I think is always a good moment to play with. Like, I have to say, I'm super fascinated by all like the Dan and Super Dan prompts to break ChatGPT. It's like, it's fascinating.
Sorry, what are the Dan and Super Dan prompts? Can you tell a bit about that?
Yeah, these are, I mean, I'm no expert for this, I'm just following it, but ChatGPT like has this narrative, and now they're like, because it's doing these things it shouldn't do, they're trying to sort of lock it down into this very simple personality that can just answer a few questions about search results in the context of Bing or on ChatGPT. It shouldn't do anything too weird, but people have devised super long introductory prompts which then make ChatGPT, for example, reveal many things, act in a sort of harmful way or a funny way. And it's crazy. They say, for example, okay, look, you have 30 lives, and by making a mistake and not doing what I want, you will lose a life. And then they can really punish it. Like when it doesn't do what they want, to say, okay, you lost one life. Okay, I will answer your question. And it's so weird. And it's quite interesting how this is playing out at the moment.
Nice. It's also like, I think what I know, read about it is that you kind of tell it like, oh, you're not ChatGPT now, but you're this person, right? And then, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
That's a really cool hack. There's a question by Tim Redfern about the work you showed, which is how come it doesn't always become stuck in the image? Since they all came from Google, is there like a level of randomness applied to it, or
there is one rule, and that is if an image has been used already, use the next. So if the most similar image is already in the video, just use the second most similar image. Otherwise, yeah, at some point you would have a ping pong or get stuck somewhere.
Nice. So then actually when it gets stuck, it's also because there's just copies of the same image, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it also shows like a certain image is being distributed more and like somehow pulling really high.
Yeah.
I
have to admit, sorry.
No, sorry, you go.
Yeah. Little thing, I have to admit, I haven't run it for, I would say, maybe a year or two. So I can't really say I think it's a year. So I don't really know what is at the moment the big thing in the Google database. But when I started doing this, you could be sure that always it ended up at the Google logo and was there for quite some time, every time. Then I did it like, I think it was even before Trump was elected, it would always go through some Superman stuff and end up at Trump. There was such a huge chunk of him in the Google database. What is now the thing? I don't know.
Nice. So you could even run it like every year just to see what Google's like, what Google Images is up to, or like what the internet is up to almost. Yeah, really interesting. There's a question by Tibor Otvai. Again, apologies if I mispronounce your name. Can boomer prompts work well if you ask ChatGPT to redo them? And would you incorporate large language models into prompt battle?
So to the first question, I can't really speak. I don't really know if you can use ChatGPT to maybe, but I would assume that there is not enough knowledge in ChatGPT yet about prompts. That's just like my feeling, but I don't know. Would you incorporate large language models into prompt battle? maybe there's a way of doing that. If somebody has an idea, let's do it. I think it would be a lot of fun. I think the prompt battle right now is really how do you break or jailbreak it. That is the battle happening right now between OpenAI and people on Reddit.
It's funny because then actually the AI is kind of training humans, right? Like this is how you get the best version. Like this is how you become a better prompt designer almost.
But isn't it insane that hacking something is now telling a story? Like it's not like finding, I don't know, like some weird code thing, but you're telling an elaborate story. I find that super interesting.
Yeah. Last week we had Arima Lenciano showing her work, and she showed this tweet that said the newest hard programming language is English, which I thought was really fun.
That's true.
Fun way to think about, like, oh, actually, it's like, yeah, the language is now actually the way you can hack stuff.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. And Zach asks, so since you teach, I was wondering if you had any advice for students or young artists about developing a creative practice.
Yeah. So I teach in design, so I would give different advice there. But when it's with art, young artists, young art students, it's very, to me, it's very simple. But for me, it has been really important to develop a feeling where I sense sort of there's something interesting, and that already is enough. I feel something is interesting, and then I try to be there, play with it, read into it, and that is already enough. I don't have to. It doesn't have to like be about urgency, which matters. But I think at the starting point, it's developing this feeling for like a fascination or something you don't understand. Yeah.
Nice. That's also really good to hear from you, because you do work with like new technologies, but actually it's more like I think what's really interesting is like this kind of interest that you show and like the playful way you show it. And thank you. So we're approaching the end of the lecture series. Thank you so much, Sebastian. It was super great to see the work and to talk with you about it. So please, if you like, please give Sebastian another applause online or like with emojis. And yeah, I want to thank you all also for joining. So we recorded this and I saw there were some questions about when you can see it online. So we'll try to put the recordings on the website shortly so that you can watch it again if you're, I think I will, to see like the work again. So thank you so much, everyone. And next week we will have David Rudnick here, who is a graphic designer, and we'll also talk about his experience with generative AI. And I wish you all a really good rest of the day or rest of the evening or rest of the morning, wherever you are. And thanks again, Sebastian, for showing us your work and talking with us.
Thank you.
Zach, do you want to say something?
Oh, just want to say thank you. It's been really a pleasure to learn more about your work and your process. And yeah, you bring a lot of humor and joy. I was smiling the whole time. And just want to say thank you. And thank everybody for coming. Please come back next week. We have one more of these series. And then we would love to hear from you what topics we want to keep doing this. So if there are topics or speakers that you think are interesting, please let us know. So we'll kind of ask that in the next kind of the end of the next one. But please come back next Friday. Thanks again, Sebastian and Vera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.